Hello and welcome back to another tutorial video. Apologies that this one is out very late. I intended for this to be out soon after the last one, but got caught up doing various other things. In this tutorial, what we're going to do is finally look at creating and editing samples, and then eventually what we'll do is we will have a look at slightly more advanced sampling editing techniques in Audacity, but for now, for this tutorial, I think we'll just stick to the basics in terms of sample editing and sample creation. What the main things are that you'll need to take note of and understand in a sample, and how they are relevant to our implementation of these samples in Fmod later on. So without further ado, what we'll do is we'll go grab an audio of the Porsche 911. In fact, one of the things I failed to mention in my earlier tutorials is that what you should do with the SDK Fmod file and folders is you should copy them over to a different location and edit your new copied file, so that you don't edit the official SDK files, just in case if you mess something up or the file gets corrupted, then you can come back to the original, copy it over again, and then work on the copied file. And the second thing, so hence this is a copied file and folder structure, and the second thing is, before you import audio into Fmod, which we will do probably in the next tutorial, what a good idea is to do is, in your assets folder, organize all of your Fmod wave files. So for example, if I want to make a sound mod for the Porsche 911 RSR 3 liter, the 1970s version, then what I would do is create a folder like I've done here, called something similar to what you're doing. So in this case, 911 RSR 74. You see I've got all of these different folders for different cars that I've modeled, and this just helps you organize your assets very clearly and concisely, and it helps you find any audio files that you may need in the future. Now, if you just drag and drop an audio file into Fmod, it will just dump it into this main folder. It won't organize the file in any way like you can manually here, and that becomes a bit of a disadvantage if you, say for example, want to reuse some of your audio files. Going and finding them, remembering what they're called, might not be the easiest thing to do, especially if you've got so many mods like I have. So I actually didn't know this when I initially started modeling in Fmod, and what ended up happening is I just dragged every single audio file, every single sample that I'd make, I just drag it straight to Fmod, and what that would do is it would just dump all the samples in this one folder. So what I've got here is a whole host of samples that I've used for all sorts of mods. And then later on I realized that, well, actually I can just make folders in here, and I can then import those files into Fmod, and Fmod will organize them even in its own subsystem in a folder structure, and so it's much easier to find files that I might need to reuse again. Anywho, let's jump in to the Porsche 911 RSR 1974. I'm just going to double click on that to maximize it. Now this is an audio recording of the car internally, and what we're going to do is listen through some bits, point out some things that I'm looking for, and then we're going to try and make a couple of samples to get an idea of how to give you an idea of how the process is, or how I do the process anyway, of making samples using these free software. We're just going to jump in here. We won't go directly to the start, we'll just jump in somewhere in the middle and see what we've got. Right, so here we've got another car alongside or in front of the car we want to record, and so we'll just skip to you can hear the second car there again, so we'll just skip to an area where we're on our own. So here what I hear is really nice long increase in RPM, and what that gives us is a really long sampleable chunk to cut out for the high RPM sound. So the way I try and make samples is I try and do at least 4 or 5 per RPM range, and what I mean by that is try and make 4 samples for on throttle and 4 samples for off throttle minimum, and then an idle one as well. So in this case we've got a really nice sounding long high RPM sample on throttle, of course. So what I'm going to do is copy this, and then I'm going to open a new file. I'm going to set it to stereo 44 kilohertz and leave that at 1 second, and we're going to delete what's in there and paste our little snippet that we just copied into here. I'm going to play it again to make sure it's the right thing. Okay, first thing I like to do is maximize the volume. What that does is increases the volume of the file, but it doesn't make any compression to the audio, so it'll increase the audio as much as it can up until the clipping point. So you won't get clipping audio with this, but you'll get a louder overall sound. Play again. Okay, so now we hear that we have an increase in pitch going on because the car is still accelerating. And so what we need to do is flatten the pitch of this sample so that Fmod can make its pitch modulation, and we can loop the sound so the sound keeps playing. And the way I do that is by using the Doppler effect. In Goldwave, the Doppler effect is just a fancy name for a pitch versus time graph that you can adjust yourself. And so we've got time along the x-axis, pitch on the y, and here's our preview button that we can use to preview any changes we make in this window. So at the moment our pitch is increasing, and so what we want to do to flatten it is decrease the pitch. In this case it's not letting me play a sound, preview a sound, because my microphone's recording in the same software. So you see how our pitch changes are taking effect here, and the pitch here is quite, it's not flat, but it's still increasing, but it's increasing to a much lesser degree. And so what we're going to do is do that again, and now we have the opposite problem where the pitch is actually decreasing. Normally what you'd do is you'd stay in this window and you'd make minor tweaks, and you would press this play button to preview it, make a minor change, preview it, make a minor change, preview it, and it's not letting me do that due to the fact that I'm recording in the mic in this software anyway, so it won't let me do that. So let's try this. So that seems pretty constant to me. It's just this side is a bit lower still, and so what we're going to do is keep this side like at the original value, so that we don't mess up any of the transition between the highlighted and non-highlighted part, and we just increase this ever so slightly. And that sounds pretty good. So the next thing we're going to do is loop this sound so it can be played again and again without any clicks and pops. And the way we do that is reverse it, then copy and paste, and then reverse it again. And so what we have is the original file and then the reversed version of the file. And sometimes we can still get clicks and pops. It's not really a click and pop, but it's a slight discontinuity in the audio. That's more of a click and a pop. And so what I like to do is we take off we take out the harsh transition. There must be some science to this which I haven't actually studied yet, because sometimes that works for me, sometimes it doesn't. It didn't work that time. But the rest of the process for this file is literally just trying to get the clicks and pops removed at the joints and the transitions. Some audio software allow you to when they loop the sound, when they play it again, what they'll do is they'll have a little fade where it crossfade between the two ends of the sound, and that will really get rid of that problem. But in Fmod it doesn't do that, so there might be a setting I don't know about, but I haven't found it yet. So but essentially that's a high RPM on throttle sound done, minus the click and pop removal. So what we've done there is one kind of sample. That's just you're making a constant engine sound that can be used at high or low RPM constantly, and in a situation where the driver is going to be on throttle or off throttle, on throttle in this case, for long periods of time. And that's the kind of sample we've made here. So that's one kind of sample that you can make. You can make the whole rev range of the car like this, and that's absolutely fine. So you can make the mid RPM samples like this, you can make the low RPM samples like this, but the way I like to do mid or low, and especially gear shift samples and sounds, is a bit different, and that's what I'm going to show you next. So the second way to make a sound sample is with two different distinct parts to the sample. One part would be the for example, a gear shift sound, an upshift sound, and the second part would be the looping region, and that's what we're going to look for now. In fact, perhaps we should do a mid-range sample to showcase this, since I don't know if I'm going to find a gear shift sample here. So that's the idea, with the upshift sounds and with the quote-unquote jumping back on throttle sound. This is why we're making a two-part sample. Again, if you listen here, we've got a bit of curb coming in there. And then the same thing actually, this method we're going to use here for the double parts, for the two-part sample, we can even use this in the downshift sound. And what we'd do is we'd place that sound in the off throttle section, right at the top end of the rev range, where the rev range would, where on our way down the gears, as soon as we shifted down a gear, the rev range would dip into that sample and play the downshift sound first. I think we do get a bit of curb in there, but I'll make this one just for the purposes of this tutorial. In fact, we'll save this, and what we'll save it as 911 RSR74. I'm just going to call it internal sound, enter that folder, and we'll call it 911 RSR74 internal sound on throttle, high RPM. Now we're going to paste our little snippet into the empty file and have a listen again. So you can hear our on throttle sound, and we can also hear the driver continue to drive the car in the mid RPM range. So again, we're going to do the same thing as before, correct for the pitch after maximizing the volume, and again it won't let me preview. That was a good guess. You get used to doing that after a long time sound modeling. You get used to what you hear and what correction you need to make. So here we want to preserve the on throttle sound and loop the rest of it, because we still want Fmod to loop the sound. If you get on throttle in mid RPM and you're in the pits, for example, you're hitting the pit limiter, but you're still on mid RPM. If we don't loop the sound will stop playing. So you'll end up with a dead sample halfway through the pit lane, and you won't be able to hear your car. So yeah, this is again the two-part sample. So the first part is the part that always stays there. Whenever the sample's triggered, it will sound like the driver's jumping back on the throttle. In this case, in some cases, it can be a gear shift up or down. And when the second half of the sample is entered by Fmod, it will just loop that second half, and the first half, or the first part rather, will never play again unless you trigger the sample again by jumping on throttle, for example. And so that's the kind of implementation that's at play here. And so what I'm going to do is select a bit of sample to loop. And we're going to be careful about how we loop this one. And so I'm going to copy it, and what I like to do is open a new file temporarily. In that file I will do my reverse copy paste reverse, and then I will check that's nasty. But for the purposes of this tutorial, I won't delve into too much of the click and pop removal, because that can take quite a lot of time. And if I copy this back to our original file, you can see now I have the on throttle, jumping on throttle section, and then I have the section that I will loop eventually in Fmod. And so what I want to do is mark this region so that I can command Fmod to loop this region later. So I will add a marker, and you can see at the bottom of the file the marker has been added. I will save this as the same, but I'll put mid because it's on throttle mid-range RPM, and then I will close that file, and I will also close the dummy file that I made. So there's one more step to making samples like that, and that is opening Wavesaw. Remember when in one of the first tutorials I mentioned all the software that needs to be installed? Well, we use every single bit of software for little things that little features that don't exist in the other software. And so I mean, I probably could do all my editing in Wavesaw, just like I do in Goldwave, but I haven't used Wavesaw at all for any editing, and I'm much more used to the workflow that Goldwave offers and the effects that Goldwave offers. So yeah, it is what it is. So I'll drag this file in, and you can see the marker is preserved. What I'm going to do is double click this to highlight the section to the right of the marker, and then I'm going to hit L on the keyboard, and that will mark this as a loop region. So when we import this into Fmod, probably in the next tutorial at some point, we're going to, well, Fmod is going to see that in the audio file and automatically loop through that. So when the sample's triggered, the on throttle sound will play, and it will, the play header will delve into this. As soon as it delves into this part of the sample, it will keep looping this part of the sample, and unless the sample's re-triggered, it will keep looping that part of the sample rather than playing the on throttle sound again and again and again. And so that's how we make on throttle, jumping on throttle sounds. That's how we make upshift sounds. That's how we make downshift sounds. Anything that you want to happen when the sound is triggered in relation to the engine note, this is how we make that. So if I can quickly find an upshift sound, I'll quickly do that one. There we go. So what I would do with this one is exactly the same as before, as the on throttle mid RPM sound that we saw. I noticed that the pitch is quite constant along this part of the file, and it needs decreasing along this part of the file. Too little. Now we need to increase the left side a bit. Sounds alright to me. What I'm going to do now is the same as before. I'm going to copy the section we want to loop, open a new file, reverse it, copy, paste, and reverse it. You can use shortcuts in this. Control C, Control V, Control N to open a new file, Control S to save. Again, I know they have clicks and pops. But I copied it twice. Right, so I know they're going to have clicks and pops in, but for the purpose of the tutorial, we're just going to roll with that for now. Again, let's put our marker in. The marker will be inserted where the playhead is. That's why I clicked here, so the sound would play up until this point. So let's add the marker. Control S to save it, and we will save this as upshift. And we'll do exactly the same thing with, we can get rid of this one. We do exactly the same thing with our off throttle sounds as well. So it's a bit of a complex thing, sample making is. This isn't a simple process where you can just, do it off the bat. You have to learn this, you have to practice it, you have to perfect it. What I'm explaining here is basically 3 years of me listening to my own sounds and being like, why doesn't that sound real? Why doesn't that sound real? What if I do it like this? What if I record like this? What if I loop like this? And it's constant improvement, constant questioning, constant analysis, and that's how you come to this point of sophistication in sample making. It's not just something that you can say, oh yeah, I need to do this. No, it's a work in progress thing where you learn yourself, you learn your own techniques, you learn what suits your sounds better, you learn your own recording methods and your own pitch shifting methods, etc. And you do it your own way, and that's how it is. So anywho, I think that's enough for now. The next tutorial will hopefully be a lot sooner than this one. What we're going to do is we're going to place these samples and other ones that I will make for this car as a test sound in Fmod, and then what we'll do is drive it in the real game, and then after that it's just going to be little things. This is one of the main things sample making and Fmod we covered Fmod usage in the previous video. That's one of the main things. The other things are very simple, how to do turbos, how to do blow off valves, that kind of thing. Those are relatively simple. Screech sounds, wind sounds, I think I'll round all those up in one final tutorial after we've made this this internal sound. And yeah, that'll be our tutorial series finished then. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you found this very informative, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.